Colombia, political organizations launched an operation to denounce multiple cases of electoral crimes and fraud committed during the legislative elections held on March 13th. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development warns that the conflict in Ukraine will reduce global economic growth and increase inflation. The death toll in the province of Nampula, northern Mozambique, as a result of cyclone Gombe's passing rose to 52. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Dio Martin, from the Telesur Studios in Havana. We begin with the news. In Colombia, political organizations launched an operation to denounce multiple cases of electoral crimes and fraud committed during the legislative elections held on March 13th. In this regard, historical PACT representatives denounced fraud in more than 30,000 voting tables where the electoral results were rigged to show that the coalition had not received any votes. Likewise, the Afro Community's circumscription to the Chamber of Representatives published several proofs of electoral crimes after citizens alerted that their votes did not appear counted in the webpage of the registry office. Social movements affiliated to Historical PACT announced that they will present an initiative to recover up to 500,000 votes and at least 2 seats in the legislative chamber. Colombian Senator Iván Cepeda asked Iván Duque's government if it is using the country to store nuclear or biological weapons. Senator Iván Cepeda posted the formal request on Twitter asking the president to clarify if he planned to use Colombian territory to store nuclear and biological material coming from the United States. This request came after President Iván Duque expressed to local media that Colombia could install United States equipment that might be useful in case of a supposed risk situation. Duque's position falls in line with U.S. President Joe Biden's intentions to designate Colombia as NATO's main ally in the region. In Peru, the Constitutional Court declared the habeas corpus case that reinstated the pardon granted to former President Alberto Fujimori to be well-founded. The legal instance approved the release from prison of former President Alberto Fujimori based on the presidential pardon granted on his behalf in 2017, citing alleged humanitarian reasons. The pardon, granted then by former President Pedro Pablo Kuczynski, was annulled in 2018, ordering Fujimori's capture and subsequent imprisonment. The former president is serving a 25-year prison sentence for crimes against humanity for the massacres in Barrios Altos and La Cantuta in 1991. And in Argentina, the government is waiting for the Senate to vote on the approval of the refinancing agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Gabriela Cerruti, a spokesperson for the presidency, thanked the members of Congress who made an effort to move forward with the debates. Cerruti expressed that the executive branch hopes that the parliament turns the agreement with the Monetary Fund into a law that will help the country's economy. Meanwhile, the Legislative Palace is under protection to avoid incidents such as the one that occurred in the last Senate debate when the office of Vice President Cristina Fernandez was vandalized. Also, the IMF pointed out that social and political support is key to guarantee the success of the agreement reached with the Argentinian government on the refinancing of the $45 billion debt, so as to avoid default and curb rising inflation. Representatives of the financial body made the statement at a time when some sectors of the Buenos Aires government expressed their reservations about the deal, while at the same time social sectors are mobilizing to express their discontent with the agreement and demand an increase in social programs to mitigate the impact of inflation. Let's head on down to Bolivia. The Constitutional Court of the country annulled the 2020 electoral veto to Evo Morales. The court declared unconstitutional the invalidation of the candidacy of former President Evo Morales, ordering the nullity of the jurisdictional resolution and the full reparation of his rights. The judicial body will grant the requested protection, according to the resolution issued on February 20th of 2020 by the Supreme Electoral Court. Morales was exiled in Argentina during 2020 elections and was the top senatorial candidate for the department of Cochabamba. The resolution, however, declared firm and subsistent the results of the 2020 general elections, ruling out the possibility that Morales could be declared national senator. And with more news from Latin America, on Thursday, workers and members of popular movements in Panama marched to the National Assembly to demand improvements in working conditions and salaries. According to calls issued by the National Confederation of Independent Unions through a social network, among the demands to the National Congress are the lowering of prices of basic food basket and services, which increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. Union leaders announced that they will carry out a national strike on April 4th if the Panamanian Chamber of Construction does not agree to the salary increase demanded by the sector's workers. During the mobilization, they also demanded justice for workers, producers, native people, educators, and inhabitants of poor settlements facing eviction. Also in Central America, but in Honduras, the defense of former President Juan Orlando Hernandez will appeal to the decision to extradite him to the U.S. under charges of drug trafficking. The defense team of the former president, whose extradition to the United States was granted on Wednesday by a magistrate of the Supreme Court of Justice, stressed they will file an appeal on the court's decision. Attorney Felix Avila, who is part of the defense, declared that the measure will be filed as established in the law, considering the decision as an error of the judicial power. He also expressed there is a decision of a judge that the defense will respect, but if mistakes were previously made in the extradition cases, they must be corrected. In Venezuela, the Minister of Health informed that they will receive a new shipment of vaccines from the Global Access Fund for COVID-19 vaccines, COVAX. This new batch, with more than 4.8 million doses, is the sixth to arrive in the Bolivarian nation and will allow an advance in the reinforcement program, according to local authorities. The minister indicated that so far the country has vaccinated 100% of the adolescent population and 61% of the child population. Finally, officials affirmed that the booster doses will be administered every 4 months. New economic actors continue to grow in Cuba. The Caribbean island already has more than 2,000 micro, small, and medium-sized private enterprises and 49 state-owned organizations. From Havana, our correspondent Fabiola Lopez tells us more details.
This is perhaps one of the most magical places in Havana.
¿Y qué me dicen del área de los simuladores? Ya saben que les permitirán viajar en tren.
Here you can find the unimaginable under the maxim that fun is serious business. Talking trees, screaming monkeys, augmented reality, robotics, cyber cafes, or at 12D cinema to experience crazy sensations. The Finca de los Monos Technology Palace is one of the local development projects managed by Cinesoft Recreation, one of the 3 small and medium-sized enterprises created by the socialist state-owned company Cinesoft.
Medium and small-sized enterprises are born free. That is, they have a system of ownership relationship with the company that creates them, but they're very free at the time of their management. Therefore, they are born with the application of new salary systems. They're born with new purchase and sale relationships with other actors of the economic. They're born with facilities for exporting and importing, and they're born, above all, with the possibility of a more participative management of their employees.
Spiral Solutions is one of the new private ventures that now has the possibility of working in alliance with the state-owned company Cinesoft.
Today we have a framework contracts with Cinesoft for the development, maintenance, and repair of certain technological equipment, where we could not only give maintenance and repair to those that already exist and that at a given time may be obsolete, but also develop new solutions and modify solutions that already exist and that technologically do not have Cuban sovereignty because they are solutions that have technical assistance from abroad.
With the creation of the state-owned small and medium-sized enterprise EduMedia, which spun off from Cinesoft to manage audiovisual resources and informative and cultural software, Giselle Acosta is making her debut as an entrepreneur. She says that in a short time she has learned that you can have all the money in the world, but if the human capital is not adequate, the company will not be successful.
Another thing I have learned is the issue of customers. I think we have been working in terms of the company and not focus on the customer. And to be able to put a product, a service in a market where there is some competition, you have to think about the customer. When you manage to identify that gap and manage to satisfy that customer with quality, then you can also succeed in your process as an entrepreneur.
The government calls for increasing the presence of the non-state sector and experts, but the road does not seem to be smooth. One of the partners of the successful private small and medium-sized enterprise Guajiritos LLC, commercial partners of 70% of the travel agencies of the Ministry of Tourism in Cuba, assures that obstacles still remain.
The country's government is really close to what Cuba needs. There is a kind of intermediate layer that wants changes but does not know how to do it. The problem is when it is directed to direct. You have to be an entrepreneur. The entrepreneur takes risks. The entrepreneur practically does not sleep. He only thinks about the company, and as they are not entrepreneurs, it is difficult for them to change, and they get used to a way of working that they have been doing for 30 years. And those are the things that basically, I think, are
the locomotive of the national economy, not just a slogan, but the result of a truly efficient enterprise that complements the daily economy, that energizes the life of the Cuban people, that achieves an effective productive chain between the most diverse economic actors.
Fabiola Lopez, Telesur, La Habana.
We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Hi and welcome back to From the South. International organizations warn that the conflict in Ukraine will reduce global economic growth and increase inflation. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development forecasts that the war will cost the world at least 1 percentage point in its economic growth index this year, and up to 1.4% to the Eurozone, as well as 2.5% to the already high global inflation. The Paris-based organization warned about the humanitarian consequences that the conflict could bring, and also lamented that just when the world economy seemed to be emerging from 2 years of crisis due to the pandemic, a war situation erupts and will have global effects.
The war is causing a strong supply shock, which adds to inflationary pressures and disruptions already caused by the COVID-19 crisis. There is the significant negative impact on confidence, which in turn will negatively impact private consumption and business investment decisions. There is the developing impact on energy and commodity supplies, as well as disruptions to international trade and financial markets.
Russia revealed that Ukrainian Defense Ministry laboratories received $32 million in funding from Washington. The Russian head of the Radiological, Chemical and Biological section, Igor Kirillov, said that laboratories of the Ukrainian Defense Ministry located in Kyiv, Odessa, Lviv and Kharkiv were developing biological weapons. Kirillov said such laboratories were functioning under conditions stipulated in a contract signed by the U.S. Department of Defense and the Ukrainian Health Ministry. Kirillov also presented documents that prove the Pentagon's direct involvement in financing military and biological projects in Ukraine. And on Thursday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met with his United Arab Emirates counterpart Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan. During the meeting, they discussed the crisis in Ukraine, including efforts for a political settlement.
Topic today in international affairs is the situation in Ukraine, and I will talk about the actions that the Russian Federation is taking to solve the problems that have been accumulating there for years. At the same time, I'd like to express my gratitude for your balanced, objective position on this situation.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa blamed NATO for causing the conflict in Eastern Europe. Referring to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, Ramaphosa said that the fighting could have been avoided if NATO had heard the warnings of its own leaders and officials over the years that its eastward expansion would lead to further instability in the region. He also stressed the importance of understanding and articulating the causes of the conflict and advocating for peace-building measures. In addition, the South African president expressed his rejection for the use of force and the violation of international law. And the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Thursday threatened China with retaliation measures if it supports Russia and its special military operation in Ukraine. On the same scenario, Blinken told that U.S. President Joe Biden will warn Xi Jinping of retaliation if Beijing provides military aid to Russia. When they spoke on the phone on Friday, as well as a competition management between Beijing and Washington and other issues of mutual interest. He considered that it appears that China is moving in the opposite direction by refusing to condemn this aggression while seeking to portray itself as neutral. Those were the words of that Secretary of State. We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Hi and welcome back. The death toll in the province of Nampula, northern Mozambique, rose to 52 after the passing of cyclone Gombe. According to local authorities, the number of people affected and the damage after the cyclone continues to increase. According to the latest data published by the National Institute for Disaster Management and Risk Reduction, the districts of Moguinqual, Mozambique Island, Monapo, and Musuril were the most affected areas. Could continue to report new deaths as damage assessment continues. The number of people affected by the strong weather event exceeds 400,000. These are preliminary figures and are likely to rise further as the needs and damage assessment has not been completed, especially in Zambezia province where the assessing body teams continue search and rescue operations. From airlines in Nigeria to shoppers in Malawi, Africans are feeling the impact of the Ukrainian crisis in wrenching increases in the price of fuel, grains, and fertilizers. Global oil prices scaled decade-long highs of more than $100 a barrel shortly after Russian special military operation in Ukraine on February 24th, inflicting a hefty blow to many businesses south of the Sahara. Both Ukraine and Russia are also major suppliers of wheat and other cereals to Africa, while Russia is a key producer of fertilizer. The impact of the war and the West sanctions against the Kremlin are already starting to translate into higher prices for farm inputs and imported grains.
Cost of production, it has increased immensely. So they have to come together and also increase the price of bread by 40% to what it was before.
Within a month, it left that level to about 600 and something plus now. And so many industry is on diesel. Trucks that bring in food stuff from the north to the south are running on diesel. Even train runs on diesel.
Injury and omission of duty. That is the complaint that the Andalusian Federation ACOGE has placed in the hands of the Spanish prosecutor after the controversial and violent action of the Spanish security forces at the border of Melilla against refugees trying to reach Spain. More details in the following report of our correspondent Sergio Rodrigo.
The migrants' hooks are still hanging from the fence of Melilla. At this point of the border perimeter, about 2,000 people tried to cross the triple wire fence in one of the most crowded jumps of the city, but also the most violent. The Melilla ACOGE Association has submitted the image to the prosecutor's office to investigate the Spanish police for crimes of injury and omission of duty to migrants trying to reach Europe. We have seen violence against migrants in the last jump by the Federation, where it has been put in the hands of prosecutors to open proceedings on the basis of a possible crime of injury and omission of duties. More than 800 succeeded, and 200 of them were injured by police beatings. So political groups such as Adelante Andalucía have called for the immediate dismissal of the Interior Minister Grande Marlaska.
Mr. Marlaska came to Melilla to say that everything was perfect and that the civil guard acted with absolute proportionality. However, we saw videos where it is perfectly clear how migrants are beaten or gassed when they are on the ground, defenseless, or even kicked when they fall from the fence.
In Melilla, the arrival of migrants through the fence increased by more than 300%, according to the Ministry of the Interior, which reinforces its police presence. While the controversial police action against migrants at the Melilla fence is being investigated in these temporary state centers, applicants for international protection are waiting for an alternative to continue their migratory journey to the European continent.
Sergio Rodrigo y Carlos Gil, Telesur, Melilla.
We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on the website at Telesur English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Dio Martin. Thanks for watching.